Hi there, I'm Vincent Boss and I provide dating and self-improvement advice. And in today's podcast, we're going to be discussing avoid this when trying to get your ex back. I provide audio coaching for breakup recovery, trying to get an ex back, attracting someone new, and life coaching. Visit www.dateme.tips for more details. Please check your spam and junk folders if you are expecting an email from me. So now let's get back into today's podcast, and today we are discussing avoid this when trying to get your ex back. So if you have been dumped and want to try to get your ex back, there are certain things you need to avoid doing. In today's podcast, I'll be discussing 3 things that you need to avoid when trying to get your ex back. So let's get straight into this, and point number 1 is double texting. Double texting is often a sign of insecurity and often a sign of neediness. It's also something which is very, very common. But if you want to try to increase the chance of getting your ex back, you need to avoid double texting. Now, I believe in most instances, if you have been dumped, you should never contact your ex again unless they contact you first. Now, there are some caveats to this rule, there are some exceptions, but generally speaking, this is the position as a dumpee I think you should be in. Never contacting your ex again unless they contact you first. Now, if and when your ex does contact you, if and when you have one of these caveats and you actually reach out to your ex first, whatever the instance is where you have communicated with your ex, you need to make sure that you do not double text. So what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is you've sent the message and before you've received a response, you send another message. A classic one being something along the lines of, "Did you get my message?" Now look, we're not living in the year 2000. In the year 2000, for those of you who remember, text messages would often get lost somewhere out of space. Nobody really knew where they went, but often people didn't receive text, sometimes never at all, sometimes they'd get them 2 weeks later. But we're not in the year 2000 now, and it's very, 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 very rare for a text message to not get through to someone. Additionally, if people are using messaging apps, you will know full well if it has gone through. You often see a received signal. So in essence, you will know deep down if your ex has received your message. If your ex hasn't responded, and this goes not just for exes, but for anybody at all, if somebody doesn't reply to you, it is either because they can't or they don't want to. So part A of this is they can't. They are busy, they are unavailable. If and when they can, they will respond. Even if you know that not only has the message been received, but it has been read. If they haven't responded to you, and it's part A of this situation, which is that they can't, it means that they have read it, but they've been unable to reply. Maybe they're busy, maybe they're at work, maybe they're thinking, I want to send a response when I get a few minutes to think about what I actually want to say, instead of doing this in 5 seconds, because this is all I have time for. Now, part B of this is unfortunately because they don't want to. If somebody doesn't reply to you and they've read the message, this is a possibility. But either way, if they don't want to or if they can't, what does this mean? It means you shouldn't send another message. Because if they can't respond, then if and when they can, they will. And if they don't want to, then you send them a text saying, hey, did you get my message? That is not going to help. Because if you are somebody who doesn't want to reply, the last thing you want is to be nagged. The last thing you want is to be further frustrated. Now, you might be thinking your ex-dumper has no right to be feeling this way about a simple message you have sent. Maybe it was due to one of the caveats. Maybe it was because they actually reached out to you, you responded with a question, and they haven't responded back to you. Okay, it doesn't matter where you're coming from on this. Again, this might not even be with your ex. This could be in any situation in life. If somebody doesn't reply, it's because they can't or they don't want to. And ultimately what that means is you do not have to do anything. Now, there might be some odd, rare exceptions where you do send a double text. Everything I suggest has to be used with a degree of common sense. But I would say 97, 98% of the time, you do not need to send another message. And if you do, you're going to be coming across as needy. You're going to be coming across as insecure. You could be coming across as desperate. And you're very unlikely to improve your cause. Because if your ex was always going to reply to you as soon as they got a chance, and they see 2, 3 more messages from you asking why you haven't replied, that's going to annoy them. And if they didn't want to reply to you at all, and they receive those types of messages from you, well, guess what? They're going to be even more frustrated. If you want to increase the chance of getting your ex back, you need to implement the tennis rule. Imagine texting is a game of tennis. You hit the ball over the net to them, they must hit it back before you can hit it once more. So think of that as texting. You've sent a text, you've hit the ball over the net in a game of tennis. You can't hit the ball again until they've hit it back to you. And if they don't hit it back to you, there's nothing for you to hit back to them. Remember the rule. Remember the tennis rule when it comes to texting. So now let's get into point number 2 and the second point of today's podcast about avoid this when trying to get your ex back. And point number 2 is quizzing them. So let's say you have got to the communication stage and you are at a point where you are conversing with your ex again. The last thing you want to be doing is quizzing them. Of course, you want to be asking questions. That is how you grow a conversation. But don't quiz your ex. Don't hammer them with questions which makes them feel uncomfortable. In particular, avoid questions about relationships. That includes relationships in general. That includes breakups. That includes dating. So don't ask them a question about your relationship that you once had together. Don't ask them a question about your breakup. Don't ask them a question about if they're dating anybody new. Now, if they ask you these questions, yes, of course, you can then carry on the conversation. If they bring this up to you, then of course, use your common sense. But if you've just got to the communication stage, if you've been using my version of a no contact rule and ended up getting your ex-dumper to reach out to you after 6 months, the last thing you want to do is put, "Hi, thanks for your message. By the way, are you dating somebody new? Why did you dump me? Do you miss our old relationship?" If you do these things, you're going to be pushing your ex further away very, very quickly. You just got them back into communicating. You do not want to scare them off. Now, if you would like support going through a breakup, if you would like life coaching, if you want to increase the chance of getting your ex back, then you may want to consider my audio coaching service, where me and you can speak one-on-one about your specific unique circumstances. Go to my website www.dateme.tips for more information about how I can become your coach and your teammate via my audio coaching service. So now let's get into point number 3 and the final point of today's podcast about avoid this when trying to get your ex back. And point number 3 is over-apologizing. If you've been dumped, you might think to yourself, I must have done something wrong, that is why they've dumped me. Now, this may or may not be true. I would say, in a broad sense, it is likely to be true, but that is because we're all human beings. We all make mistakes. I make mistakes. You make mistakes. Your ex-dumper has made mistakes. So yes, broadly speaking, you probably have made errors. Ultimately, they lost romantic emotional attraction for you, and that is why, unfortunately, they ended the relationship. But dependent on exactly how your relationship was, would dictate exactly how and why they lost romantic emotional attraction. Maybe you made a lot of errors, maybe you made a huge error, or perhaps you didn't really do much at all, and unfortunately you were just not compatible personality-wise. Maybe your ex-dumper started to grow in a different direction and felt that you were no longer right for one another. It's never easy to precisely look at exactly where and when the emotional attraction was lost from somebody in a romantic sense, but sometimes it's easier than others. Again, every relationship is different, every breakup is different, but whatever your position, whatever the situation, you can't be apologizing. It doesn't show you in a good light. Now you might think, well, surely it does. I'm apologizing. Well, again, the theme of today's podcast, use your common sense. If you need to apologize, then yes, obviously apologize. If you cheated on your now ex, yes, obviously apologize. If you didn't do something completely terrible, but it was a number of small things and you really want to work on those things, then yes, apologize. But you apologize once. Maybe if it was severe, you apologize a few times. However, you do not over apologize. You do not apologize 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. Okay? If it's something minor, just do it once. If it's something major, maybe 2 or 3 times in different ways, in different conversations, really showing you're genuine, you're honest, and you're being sincere. But it will get to the stage where you must stop apologizing. You can't beat yourself up forever. If you and your ex are going to get back together, you need to have a level playing field when it comes to the scales of value. Now, what exactly do I mean? Well, what I would say is that the scales of value at the time of a breakup are not going to be in your favour as a dumpee. When we look at the scales of value after a breakup, the dumper is the high value individual because they've got what they wanted, they made a choice, their decision ended up being the permanent one. And the dumpee, unfortunately, you are the low value individual in regards to your position. Your position is that you wanted something to happen, i.e. you wanted the relationship to continue, and it didn't take place. So what you wanted didn't happen. What they wanted did happen. They were in the high value position, you were in the low value position. We need the scales of value to be even. And one of the ways we do this is to represent ourselves as a level playing person. So what I mean here is if you keep apologizing, you are constantly showing yourself as somebody who is lower value. Now again, you've got to use your common sense. You may need to apologize for something, but if you keep apologizing, it's like you're on your hands and knees. You can't be like that. You can't be begging for forgiveness. This is not going to level the playing field. This is not going to show you as a dateable option. Your ex-dumper wants to find somebody who they feel compatible with. They ended the relationship for one of potential many reasons. At this point, they're communicating with you once again. You need to showcase yourself as somebody who is apologetic when necessary, but also you have grown in your value. You're not going to be on your hands and knees. If you want to get back together, you must forgive each other. That doesn't just mean them forgiving you for things, you also need to forgive them. In essence, you need to forgive them for dumping you. If you get back together and then the first bump in the road of your relationship, you are holding each other to account from the past, that's not going to help. If you get back together, you must forgive one another. You need to understand that this is a new relationship, hopefully built on stronger foundations, which will last the test of time. So, you have to put things behind you. If you can't get over something, if they can't get over something, it's not going to work. It's not going to work if you or your ex will only get back together if you demand to look at each other's phone every hour, because you need to make sure that you are not texting somebody you shouldn't be. Okay, that is no way to live. You either trust somebody or you don't. If they don't trust you, then they shouldn't reconnect with you. If you don't trust them, then you shouldn't reconnect with them. So, if you over-apologize over and over and over and over and over again, you are not allowing yourself to grow your value. You are remaining the low-value option. You are showing yourself as somebody who is begging for forgiveness on your hands and knees. That is not an attractive position. Yes, apologize if necessary, but please don't keep apologizing for things that you no longer need to. Say your piece, be sincere, show growth, don't make that mistake again, but then they must forgive you. And if they don't, then you shouldn't want to be with them, let alone them be with you. You need somebody who's going to accept you as an equal partner. They need to feel the same. Sometimes one of the most difficult things during reconnection is actually coming to a conclusion that although you have forgiven each other for a lot of things, some things you just can't let go of. And if you can't, you would be better off meeting a new partner. Because living together or even just dating one another once more when you can't forgive yourself fully is always going to cause problems, because we have bumps in the road. Relationships have bumps in the road. They're never smooth sailing forevermore. And you need to be strong when those bumps take place. If you are not in a good position, then the first time there's just a minor disagreement, you're going to be bringing things up again, which is not going to help you, and you will break up once more. So point number 3, stop over apologizing. If you believe that this podcast has helped you, then please consider buying me a coffee. The link to do so is in the description.